Today is Friday, April 11th, 2014. My name is Debra Polsky with the Dallas Jewish Historical Society, and I'm interviewing Alan Greenberg, and we're going to talk a little bit about his life. So, Alan, tell me a little bit about your family history.
My mother's maiden name was Fay Mitloff, and my father's name was Julius. My mother grew up in Rochester, New York, and my father grew up in New York City. And I don't even know how they met, to be honest with you. I know my father came to Rochester to work for my uncle. My father was a pharmacist, and he worked for my Uncle High in his pharmacy. And then he opened up his own. And he was in business for over 25 years. My mother stayed at home, took care of myself and my sister. I have a younger sister, she's 3 years younger. And what else? What more do you want?
Where and when were you born?
Born December 7th, 1942.
Wow.
Year after Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. In Rochester?
In Rochester, right.
Okay. And do you know when your family came to the United States? Or how they came, where they came from?
My mother's side I know more about than my father's side. My mother's family came from Russia, I believe. And I guess my grandfather, he passed away before I was ever born. He was here before my grandmother, and she came over with, I think, 3 children, and my mother was the youngest. And my mother lived to be 95. She passed away about 4 years ago. And my father passed away about 14 years ago.
So your mother was actually born in Russia.
No,
Oh.
she was the baby.
Your
She was born in New York
Oh,
State.
she was born in New York. Okay.
Yeah, she was born in Rochester.
Okay.
Yeah.
And but her siblings were born in Russia, or?
3 of them were.
Okay.
3, correct.
Okay.
And she had a total of 7.
And did you know, you said one of your grandparents was gone before you were born. Did you know your other grandparents?
Just my father's mother. My grandfather also passed away before I was born. And she lived with my father's sister, and we didn't see her too often. We generally were involved with my mother's mother,
Right.
that side of the family.
Got it. And do you know what brought them to America, or why they came?
You got the
How
wrong
they
person.
came.
I have no idea. No, I wasn't too involved in that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
No, I have
that's
no idea.
pretty typical. I mean, most of us don't know a lot about where they came from. So you grew up in Rochester, and in the, obviously beginning of World War II, during World War II, you were a young child. What do you remember as a child? I mean, what kinds of things did you like to do? Can you tell me a little about what your family life was like?
Boy, this is tough. My mother was a great, how should I put it? She was a great housekeeper, great cook, baker, took care of me and my sister. My father basically worked all the time. I rarely saw my father. I would see him if I went, when I was older, to work in the drugstore, but he was never home, basically.
Right.
So my mother took care of us.
What, you said you have a younger sister.
Right.
And what was your neighborhood like? Was it a mixed neighborhood? Was it Jewish? Was it?
No, we lived, I think when I was 12 years old, we moved from the first house I recall. It was on Hollenbeck Street. And then we moved to Rundquist, which was basically a Jewish area. And that's where I grew up. Went to school there from like the 6th grade till senior in high school.
Mm-hmm. And was your family involved in the Jewish community, or?
The involvement was belonging to Temple. That was basically it. Like I said, my father worked.
Right.
And my father really didn't take any time off until he retired, which was kind of sad when you think about it.
But pretty
But that's
typical
the way it was.
for that generation.
Yeah, I
you know,
guess.
especially if you owned your own business and were responsible for it. Do you remember celebrating Jewish holidays?
Oh, yes, yes.
What was? Tell me a little bit about what that was like. What would Passover have been like?
We'd go to my grandmother's house, and my mother's sister, and my uncle, 2 cousins, and my uncles and aunts. There must have been like 12, 15 people there. Yeah, we did that. My grandmother, gee, she lived to, I think, in the early 60s, I believe. So, yes, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I went to Hebrew school for 5 years, and had a bar mitzvah and all that stuff and everything.
Right.
Typical.
Did you go on after bar
No.
mitzvah?
No.
Tell me about your friends growing up. What do you remember? What kinds of things did you like to play, or what kinds of activities did you do?
I liked to play baseball. I was involved in sports. Unfortunately, I didn't study that much. My friends were a lot smarter than me. Or I don't know if they were smarter, but they applied themselves more than I did. And school didn't mean that much to me. I didn't really care. I got by.
Right.
And later on, I was sorry about that, but what are you going to do? That's life. But I did okay.
So you were interested in baseball. What other kinds of things did you do for fun, either with your friends or as a family?
Family, like I said, was kind of difficult because of my father really working all the time. I remember he'd have a pharmacist come in to replace him, say at 5 o'clock, and he still wouldn't come home till 7 or later. That was his life, and he didn't know any better. And my mother had to take care of us in so many different ways. This is scary.
Did she have things that she was involved in, like, you know, whether it was Temple Sisterhood or
Yeah, she
Mahjong
would do
group
that.
or things, I don't know, whatever women,
Sisterhood.
canasta, whatever women played back then?
And this is going to sound funny, but it's true. Up in New York State, they had a leper colony, and there were several Jews there. And I remember my mother and my 2 aunts, they used to go up there like once a month to help out.
Wow.
And she did that for years and years. And she was involved in the temple. When I grew up, we belonged to an older temple, and that's where I had my bar mitzvah, and then we moved, and then belonged to another temple. It kept changing over the years.
Okay. So you said you weren't that interested as a student, but were you involved in activities in high school, or, you know, other than sports, or what kind of sports?
To be honest, the bulk of my free time, I wanted to work in my father's store. Maybe that was because I wanted to see him. I don't know deep down, because I never saw him. And that's the only time I'd get to see him. So I thought about that. That could be a reason. I spent a lot of time there.
Okay. So what did you do after high school?
Went to college.
Where did you go?
Well, I was going to the University of Miami till I was accepted somewhere else. My average wasn't that great, but I had friends that were accepted at Ryder in New Jersey. So if he got accepted, there's no reason why I couldn't get accepted. So that's where I wound up.
And what kinds of activities were you involved in college?
Well, I was in a fraternity.
What fraternity?
You're asking Delta Sig.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the name. Again, I did not apply myself, but I got by. I got by.
What did you study?
Marketing, finance.
Okay. And how did that lead to a career? Or did it?
A career? Well, as soon as I graduated from college in May, I received a notice from Uncle Sam that he wanted me, and I figured I'd be in Vietnam and I wouldn't come home. I never wore boots in my life, never carried a weapon.
Right.
So I ran down to my local reserve center and fortunately got in. And I signed up actually with a couple friends, and we were supposed to go down to Fort Dix in New Jersey together. But somehow my paperwork got lost, and they went in July, and I didn't wind up going till November. And that was a fun experience. It was kind of humorous.
Yeah?
We were in a unit where the bulk of the guys were college graduates, and the sergeants didn't like us because we were college graduates. And it was just humorous. They kept threatening me with recycling me, but I knew they could only keep me for 6 months so they could do whatever they wanted to me and just let it go. Very rewarding experience.
So you were in the reserve for,
Right, for 6 years.
For
yeah.
6 years. Got it.
Yeah, and I went to all the meetings, not like a lot of people.
Right. Right.
And I moved from Rochester. I wound up going to Boston for training when I started to work for Merrill Lynch. So I was there for 6 months, and I wound up coming back to New York and was in Fort Totten for a couple of years. And that was my Army career.
I guess that's not exactly what they meant when they said join the Army, see the world.
True, true. I saw New Jersey, and that was about it.
And more of New Jersey, yeah.
Yeah, it could have been a lot worse.
True, absolutely true. And so you went to work for Merrill Lynch.
Well, that was my first job. My first job was with a retail organization. It was called Sibley's, and I worked there for about a year and a half. And then I went to Hickok Manufacturing. They made belts.
Mm-hmm.
And where did I go after that? Then I went to J.C. Penney, and during that time, I married Daniel's mother, and no one liked the job I had or the future I had there. So I started looking for other work and wound up getting a job with Merrill, and wound up training in Boston, because at that time I was going to operations, not sales, the other end. And the manager that was in Rochester was being terminated, so they didn't want me to train there, so I wound up in Boston for 6 months. And then after that, 2 more months in New York. And then, after the class, you're interviewed by managers of offices. You're just not given an office. So I wound up in Manhasset, Long Island, and worked for a crazy man. That's the way he was. I was there for about 2.5 years, and then I just moved up the road to Garden City, which was a much larger office, more productive, more money and everything. Mm-hmm. And stayed with Merrill till about 78, and we wanted to move back to Rochester. Daniel was born in 1970, so Dan was about 8 years old. And we moved back to Rochester. And Susan, my wife, and myself, we took a position with a division of Ross and Purina. And what it was, today you'd laugh at it, but anyway, it was a party plant similar to Tupperware, selling plants and stones and hydroponics. And it was done through the party plant. It was a neat idea, but I wound up getting into the business end of the company and could see it wasn't going to last because people were stealing hundreds of dollars from the company. And it didn't last. It lasted maybe 4 years. And then what happened? Okay, still in Rochester, and Susan got involved with this financial organization, and she really did well. She loved it, traveled a lot, really enjoyed it. And I wound up with a position with the county, working for the community hospital in Rochester. Community hospital functions, supplies, ordering products, stuff to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a very difficult job. And about 95, 96, that position was eliminated through the county. And I wound up, after a couple months, working for the largest hospital in Rochester, Strong Memorial Hospital, and wound up there for about 8 years, and basically in purchasing for all that time, which I really enjoyed. And I retired when I was 62. I just decided to retire, that's all.
So, so you have your son Daniel, and
That's it.
that's
Just
it.
Daniel.
Okay. And you talked a lot about the fact that your father worked all the time, typical of his generation. Did you find yourself, how did you find yourself being as a different kind of father?
Well, Daniel was not easy growing up. He was kind of a difficult kid to work with. And he was more involved with his mother than he was with me. And he became very involved with computers when he was about 9, 10 years old.
Wow.
Because we bought a computer and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And he basically lived in a room on the first floor with his computer till he finished high school. And he's always loved computers. And I don't even know what he does. Do you know what he does today? I have no idea. I know it's in the computers, but what that means, who knows? But he's done that for so many years, he really loves it. And I think we're closer now than we were years ago. Not that we're that close, but we're closer than we were. He's kind of difficult to get close with. But I'm proud of him. He's done okay.
And so what have you been doing since retirement? You said your father was more available after he retired. Did he take up hobbies, or did he do other things since he had really just been a person who worked?
Well, the problem is that I have to be honest about this. We moved back to Rochester in 1978, and my sister lived with my parents till she was in her 40s. And my parents really had nothing to do with Daniel. That always, and to this day, which is stupid, bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
My sister, in my mind, was afraid that my parents would show attention for Daniel, their only grandchild, and forget about her. So Daniel was there, and that was it. They never knew him. Grandparents-wise, he spent his time with my wife's parents.
Mm-hmm.
And it still hurts, But what are you going to do?
Right.
That's the way it was.
Right.
And my sister, to this day, thinks she did everything the right way. I mean, it's whatever.
Right. And so, obviously, you have a relationship with your grandchildren. How old are they?
3.5.
3.5, and their names?
Abby and Zoe.
Abby and Zoe. And so you come down to visit?
Not as much as I should. Come down like twice a year. Should be more.
As they get older,
Oh, it's
It's
amazing
there's
the
more
difference
stuff to
I've
do.
seen from, October, the way they've changed, it's just so dramatic.
What do you, what, if I said to you, what are you most proud of in your life? What would you say?
I don't know. I'm proud of. I didn't do anything that was anything to be proud of. I can't think of anything. It's just what an average life. That's all. Proud. Yeah.
All right, well, we'll let that one stew a little. Who would you say were your role models?
Role models.
Mm-hmm.
We'll pass that one too.
Okay.
I mean, I have no idea. Role model.
Were there, yeah, there weren't, teachers or scout leaders, people like that?
No, as I said previously, I didn't take advantage of school.
Mm-hmm.
I did as little as possible to get by. When I had to, I could, but there was no pushing on my parents' part or anything to that effect. So whatever I did was okay.
So now that you're retired, what are your interests? What are the things that you like to do?
Well, I volunteer at 3 different organizations, and I'm going to be doing more.
That's great. Tell me about the organizations.
Well, one was Meals on Wheels, which I basically gave up because I moved from one part of Rochester to another and just became a pain.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm working in a place, it's Humane Society, it's called Lollipop Farm, doing that. And the food bank in Rochester and town of Brighton, which is actually run by the Jewish Family Service, which I don't understand how that works. Do you know how it works? What do they really do? What's their involvement? The family service.
Well, it's more of a central location, generally. The Jewish Family Service here has a food bank. It's just, another place where people can come. They try to kind of spread them out. Most of them are funded by United Way at some level. And
well, is there any funding from the Jewish Family Service? That's what I can't figure out.
Sure.
There is funding.
Yeah.
Is there a local food bank in Dallas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have the North Texas Food Bank. There's lots of food banks around, but one of them is that Jewish Family Service has their own as well. So, they try to meet all kinds of different needs, I guess. And you said, so you spent some time volunteering. What else are you interested in?
Oh, play bridge. Just starting to learn how to play canasta, which is all right. It's no big deal. But in college, played euchre and other games that I've totally forgotten about. But you can play that all over the place. That's about it.
Do you still are you still in touch with friends that you knew growing up or in college?
Unfortunately, most of my friends have passed away. Unfortunately. Yeah, it's kind of sad, but that's the way it is.
Mm-hmm. What else would you like to tell us about either your family or your life, your history? What would you like your children and grandchildren to know?
Well, I guess I'm very happy that Daniel met Leah and that he has 2 children, and to see their way they're progressing. And I know it's Leah's hard work because Daniel's not around either. He's there, but he's not there. That's what I guess I'm the proudest of.
That's a lot. That's a lot. Anything else you'd like to share?
This has been very difficult. No, I'm generally a quiet guy. And like I said to Leah, if I knew this was going to be like this, I would have done it. But anyway,
they're going to love it.
It's done. It's over with.
Absolutely. All right, well, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
We really appreciate it. And we will make a copy of this and